The Tangled Threads, Chapter 15, The Unraveling. My name is Rose, and I am 25 years old. I've been living with John, who's 28, for the past 3 years. We first met at a mutual friend's birthday party, a chance encounter that blossomed into a relationship neither of us expected to last so long. He was charming back then, kind, attentive, and supportive of my dreams. But somewhere along the line, the warmth faded. It's strange to look back on the early days. We shared a tiny one-bedroom apartment in the heart of the city. The apartment felt cramped but cozy. Our bedroom, bathroom, and even our media balcony seemed like an extension of ourselves. We were building a future together, or so I thought. 3 months ago, we had the fight that would change everything. It began over something trivial, a simple disagreement about who should wash the dishes, but John's temper flared hotter than I had ever seen before. He stormed around the apartment, knocking over a chair and slamming doors, until finally he started hurling insults at me. I responded in kind, my own frustrations pent up for too long. Then he punched the wall. A small act of violence, maybe, but it was enough to shock me. His eyes burned with a fury that went beyond annoyance or everyday anger. In that single moment, I realized I no longer felt safe. The relationship we'd spent years nurturing was revealed to be a flimsy structure built on unsteady ground. It was as if everything I thought I knew about John unraveled in one violent outburst. When I saw the damage to my belongings, my laptop with a cracked screen, my favorite mug shattered into 1,000 pieces, I understood that I needed to leave. It wasn't just about the objects he'd destroyed. It was about the deeper betrayal. My trust had been shattered along with the mug. In the aftermath, we both stood there, breathless. Tears streamed down my cheeks. He looked shocked at himself, but didn't apologize, not immediately. I packed a bag, hurried down the hall, and left. In a matter of minutes, my entire life changed. I moved out and stayed with a friend while I tried to gather my thoughts and figure out my next steps. It was supposed to be a temporary situation while I decided if our relationship was salvageable. I told him we'd cool off, think about what had happened, and decide where to go from there. John, for his part, tried to fix things. He sent me long text messages full of regret and remorse, promising he'd never let his anger get the best of him again. He took time off from work, went to therapy, and even wrote me a letter about how his past traumas fueled his anger. A part of me wanted to believe him, to see him as someone who had simply lost control in a moment of weakness because of those efforts and the years we'd spent together. I couldn't bring myself to fully separate. I told him I needed space, and he respected that. We decided to take things slow, to see each other on weekends. He thought it was better if I didn't move back in immediately, and I agreed. That might be our only chance at repairing the trust that had been damaged. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the red flags. But love is a tricky beast. It thrives on hope, on the possibility that someone can change, on the belief that the person who hurt us can heal. The heart rarely sees things in black and white, especially when it's entangled in the complexities of a shared life. Then, one weekend, everything changed again. In the morning, I wandered into the bathroom to grab my razor from the drawer John and I used to share. My hand brushed against a small foil packet I had never seen before, an unopened condom. Immediately, my mind began to race. In 3 years of intimacy, we had never once used condoms. The discovery felt like a punch to my gut, as though someone had just told me a dark secret about a person I thought I knew inside and out. My first instinct was to think, he must be seeing someone else. John came up behind me, groggy from sleep. His hair was messy, and his eyes widened at the sight of the foil packet in my hand. The look on his face. Confusion, followed by what can only be described as panic, confirmed my fears. He looked like a child caught in the act of something forbidden. "What's this?" I asked, my voice calm but quivering underneath. He swallowed hard. "It's not what you think. It's old, maybe." "It can't be old." I countered. "We share this drawer. I cleaned it out a month ago. I've never seen it before." His eyes darted around the bathroom. He was searching for a plausible explanation. "Maybe a friend left it here," he said quickly. "You know, messing around." I didn't respond, just stared at him. His lie was so transparent, so desperate. My chest felt tight, and I could already feel tears threatening to form. "Which friend?" I finally asked. He hesitated, then murmured a name. Someone who hadn't visited in months. It made no sense, and he knew it. He backpedaled again. Okay, he said, raising his hands in surrender. I bought it. But I didn't do anything with it. I was just thinking we might need it. "For what?" I asked. My words hung in the air like a final verdict. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The truth was obvious. He'd cheated on me before, and like an idiot, I'd forgiven him. But now I couldn't ignore the red flags any longer. I wondered, am I really going to let an unopened condom be the last straw? But it wasn't just the condom. It was everything that led up to this moment. The anger, the damaged belongings, the betrayal in the past. This was just the final, undeniable sign. He insisted he hadn't cheated, that I was overreacting, but how could I trust him? After discovering the condom and seeing the panic in his eyes, I felt the fragile strands of trust we'd tried to reweave come apart. I packed my bag and left that morning, ignoring his pleas for another chance. It hurt, but in that moment I felt a sort of clarity. It was time to go. Chapter 2 go. The echoes of betrayal. When I walked out of John's apartment that morning, I didn't have a concrete plan. My car was parked downstairs, loaded with a few things I had brought for the weekend. Enough clothes for 2 nights, my makeup bag, a couple of books. Not nearly enough to start a new life, but at least it was something. I drove aimlessly for a while, tears blurring my vision. Familiar streets blurred into one another. My phone buzzed non-stop with calls and texts from him. Each ring made my heart twist with guilt. Was I making the right choice? Despite the guilt, I didn't answer. Eventually, I parked in front of a small cafe, decided to go inside, and sat down with a cup of coffee. The warm mug in my hands steadied me, reminded me to focus on the present moment. The barista offered me a sympathetic smile as I wiped at my puffy eyes. I reached for my phone again, scrolled through the messages. "Please don't go, Rose. I can explain everything. I love you. I messed up, but I'm not cheating." I shut the phone off. It wasn't just about whether he was cheating. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe the condom was an impulse purchase, or a misguided attempt at reassurance about something else. But the repeated betrayals in our relationship were too large to ignore. He had cheated once before, and he had lost control when we argued. No matter how many times he apologized, the fundamental issue remained. I no longer felt safe or secure. My sense of trust was eroded, replaced by suspicion and fear. Sipping my coffee, I felt an odd sense of detachment. Everything felt surreal, like I was floating outside my own body, watching myself from a distance. Sometimes heartbreak does that. It makes us feel like strangers in our own lives, helpless observers to a storm we didn't choose but still have to weather. I thought about the question that kept repeating in my head, am I wrong to leave him over an unopened condom? The answer, deep down, was no. It wasn't just the condom. It was the lie of it all, the secrecy and panic that had come with it. The condom was a symptom of a deeper rot in our relationship. After an hour at the cafe, I drove to a friend's apartment. Lily and I had been close since college, and she was the one who had taken me in when I first left John after the big fight. Her face, pale and serious, softened when she opened the door and saw me in tears. "We did it again, didn't he?" she asked, already knowing. I nodded. Lily hugged me, took my keys and ushered me inside. "You can stay as long as you need," she said. I collapsed on her couch, exhausted. Outside, the city bustled. Cars honking, people hurrying along the sidewalk. Inside, Lily's living room felt like a safe haven. I found myself recounting the entire morning in shaky detail: the condom, the look on John's face, his shifting excuses. Lily listened quietly, occasionally placing a comforting hand on my arm. When I finished, she didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't say, "You should have left him long ago." Instead, she said, "Rose, you did what you had to do." Those words calmed the guilt still swirling in my chest. You can't keep doubting yourself," she added gently. "You deserve better." I stared at the wall, eyes unfocused, feeling the weight of her words. Did I really deserve better? For so long, I'd clung to the idea that love was about forgiveness, about seeing someone at their worst and still standing by them. But maybe there was a difference between standing by someone and betraying yourself. Chapter 3: True Memories of a Love. That evening, I sat alone in Lily's spare bedroom, a tiny space barely large enough for a single bed. The walls were a cheerful yellow, the sheets a soft lavender. I had a few boxes of my stuff stacked against the wall, remnants of the life I'd begun packing when I first left John. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and my thoughts drifted back to when John and I first started dating. It was during the summer, just after my 22nd birthday. We'd met at a rooftop bar where mutual friends had gathered to celebrate. I remembered the way his eyes lit up when I introduced myself, how he insisted on buying me a drink, how we ended up talking for hours about everything. Music, travel, our childhood dreams. He confessed he wanted to visit every continent at least once in his life. I joked about wanting to become a professional writer, turning my passion for journaling into a career. The night had ended with a short walk by the waterfront, our hands brushing lightly until we finally laced our fingers together. It felt like something magical. Those early months were bliss. We discovered each other's quirks. How he hated olives, how I loved to watch classic black and white movies, how we both enjoyed late night drives to nowhere in particular. We seemed to fit together like two pieces of a puzzle. Sure, there were rough edges, but what couple didn't have them? Time, however, reveals what's hidden beneath the surface. I started noticing subtle red flags. His temper when things didn't go his way, his tendency to brush off my concerns as me being too sensitive, his occasional jealousy over my guy friends, but I ignored them because his good side was so good. He was sweet, thoughtful, and ambitious. He always remembered anniversaries and brought me surprise gifts, even if it was just a single rose to match my name. Then came the first time he cheated. I discovered text messages on his phone, messages that left no room for doubt. When I confronted him, he denied it at first. It wasn't until I threatened to walk out that he admitted his wrongdoing, begged for forgiveness, and claimed it was a meaningless fling. I was devastated, but I didn't leave him. I thought love was about second chances, about giving someone room to grow. And he did try. He tried for a while, anyway, bringing me flowers, writing me letters, calling me pet names, and telling me he loved me more than life itself. I wanted so badly to believe that he was telling the truth. For months, maybe even a year, It seemed as though we'd moved past the betrayal. We found a new apartment, something bigger with a better view, and started building a future again. Until everything shattered with that night of anger, when he damaged my belongings. And now, with the condom, the house of cards finally collapsed. As I lay there in Lily's guest bed, all these memories swirled in my mind. I found myself questioning where it all went wrong. Was there a defining moment, or was it a gradual erosion of what we once had? Regardless, it no longer mattered. The trust was gone. I clicked off the lamp and closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks. For the first time since I was 22, I was single again. The weight of the past 3 years pressed down on me like an anchor. Still, amid the sadness, I felt a small spark of relief, a tiny sense of freedom. Even though my heart ached, I was certain that walking away from John was the right choice. Chapter 4. Reaching out the next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating incessantly. I squinted at the screen, saw John's name flashing, and sighed. If I didn't pick up, he'd only keep trying. "Hello?" I answered, forcing my voice to sound collected. "Rose," his voice cracked. "I've been calling you all night." "What do you want, John?" I asked warily. "I need to talk to you. I need you to understand that I didn't cheat." He spoke quickly, as if the words were tumbling out of him in a rush. "I'm not saying I'm perfect, but you have to believe me this time. The condom was just." "He can't believe you," I interrupted. "Not anymore." A pained silence stretched between us. Finally, he let out a shaky breath. "Don't do this, Rose. We've been through so much. We can get through this too." I looked at the closed door of the guest room, the chipped paint around the doorknob. "You say we've been through so much, but John, you don't realize how those things have broken me. I've had enough." Another silence. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I'm sorry." I was angry that a part of me still stirred at his remorseful tone, that I could feel tears burning the backs of my eyes. But anger or not, I deserved more than apologies. "I have to go," I said, my voice gentler than before. "Please stop calling for a while. I need space." I hung up, and for once, my phone stayed silent. I buried my face in the pillow, letting the tears come. It was time to confront my emotions, to let them wash over me and hopefully take away some of the pain. Chapter 3. The first steps of freedom. Over the next few days, Lily helped me gather the rest of my belongings from John's place. Thankfully, he wasn't there when we arrived. I guess he respected my wish for space. It felt surreal to walk through the apartment we'd shared as though I were a visitor. The walls still held photos of us. Laughing at a friend's wedding, posing in front of a Christmas tree, embracing on a beach vacation. Now those images felt like relics from another time, another life. I packed them away methodically, unsure if I wanted to keep them or eventually throw them out. My heart was torn. These photos represented some of the happiest memories of my life, but also reminded me of a betrayal I could never forget. Lily put an arm around me as I taped the final box shut. "Ready?" she asked softly. I nodded. We hauled the boxes into her car, and with one last glance at the apartment, I closed that chapter of my life. Over the next few weeks, I began forming a routine, searching for a place of my own. Lily's apartment was cozy, but I didn't want to overstay my welcome. My job was stable enough to afford a modest place, so I started scanning online listings, setting up appointments. In between these tasks, I made room for myself, for healing. I set aside time to journal every evening, pouring my fears, doubts, and hopes onto paper. Sometimes I wrote letters to John that I'd never send, trying to articulate my anger and heartbreak in a safe space. It was like therapy, each stroke of the pen a tiny release of the tension coiled inside my chest. I also sought out the comfort of friends. Lily and I had wine nights where we watched sappy movies and cried into our popcorn. My friend Marcus took me rock climbing to channel my energy into something physical and challenging. Another friend, Daria, invited me to a painting class. I found myself splattering colours on canvas, letting my emotions flow into art. All these small acts built toward something bigger, a sense of self reclaimed. I began to realize that for the past 3 years, I had defined myself in terms of my relationship with John. Now I was forced to stand on my own 2 feet, rediscover who I was. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. Chapter 6. Through an unexpected confession. One afternoon, I was at the new apartment I'd just signed a lease for. A small one-bedroom on the outskirts of the city, with windows that overlooked a courtyard. Lily and I were painting the walls a soft lavender, our clothes splattered with flecks of paint, music playing in the background. We laughed, joked about my complete lack of painting skills, and generally enjoyed a sense of possibility in the empty space that would soon be my home. I was mid-laugh when my phone rang. I froze, seeing John's name again. "Are you going to answer?" Lily asked carefully. I hesitated, then took a deep breath. I guess I should see what he wants. Stepping into the hallway, I picked up the call. "What is it?" "I'm leaving," John said flatly. My heart skipped a beat. "Leaving where?" "The city. I got an offer to work in another state. I can't stay here. Everywhere I go, I see reminders of you, of us, and it's killing me." I leaned against the wall, paint roller still in hand, my thoughts whirling. "So you're running away?" He sighed heavily. "Maybe. But it's also an opportunity I can't pass up. I wanted to tell you in person, but you won't see me." I swallowed a lump in my throat. 1,000 emotions battled within me. Anger, sadness, relief, guilt. Did I want him to stay or did I want him gone? "When are you leaving?" I asked. "Soon. Next week, probably." Another silence stretched between us, thick with the weight of unsaid things. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice quiet. "Not just for the condom, but for everything. For the cheating, for the anger, for hurting you." I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me. If he had said these things a few months ago, I might have run back to him, clinging to the hope of change. But now I felt different, stronger. "Good luck," I said softly, ending the call. I leaned my head against the wall. Lily poked her head out, her expression anxious. "You okay?" I nodded, tears threatening to form, but not quite falling. "He's leaving the city." She stepped forward, pulled me into a messy hug, paint and all. "That might be a good thing for both of you," she whispered. Maybe she was right. Maybe we both needed a clean break. No more cycling back into old patterns. Let him move on. Let me move on. Chapter 7. Finding my own path, days blurred into each other as I settled into my new apartment. I filled the walls with art, hung up curtains, and slowly made the space my own. My job kept me busy during the weekdays, and on weekends I wandered through farmers' markets or explored the city by myself. It was lonely at times. I'd catch myself pulling out my phone, about to text John something funny I'd seen, only to remember that part of my life was over. But it was also liberating. For the first time in years, I didn't have to check in with anyone about where I was going or what I was doing. I was free. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work, I curled up on the couch with a takeout pizza and scrolled mindlessly through social media. A post popped up from John's profile. A picture of him in a new city. He was standing near a skyline I didn't recognize, smiling broadly. A part of me twisted with sadness, but another part felt relief. He was gone, truly gone, living his own life without me. I turned off my phone and turned on the TV, refusing to let my thoughts linger on him. Instead, I focused on the present, on the cheesy pepperoni slice in my hand, on the comedic show playing in front of me. Bit by bit, day by day, life moved forward. Chapter 8, the surprise encounter. 3 months passed. Autumn arrived, painting the city with shades of red and gold. I found myself enjoying long walks in the crisp air, leaves crunching underfoot. My therapist, yes, I'd started therapy, suggested these walks as a grounding exercise. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to visit a bookstore cafe downtown. With a lat in hand, I browsed the rows of novels, letting the quiet atmosphere soothe me. That's when I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned to see David, an old friend from high school. We'd lost touch years ago, but his face lit up in recognition. Rose. Wow, it's been ages. We chatted for a while, catching up on life. He'd become a web designer, working remotely from a small town. I told him a vague summary of my breakup, not wanting to dive into the messy details. David and I ended up having coffee at a small table by the window. The conversation flowed easily, like no time had passed. At one point, he said something that made me laugh, really laugh. For the first time in what felt like forever, the moment I realized I was laughing so freely, I felt an inexplicable warmth spreading in my chest. By the time we parted ways, I'd agreed to meet him for lunch the following week. My heart fluttered with a mix of nerves and excitement, a sensation I'd almost forgotten I could feel. Chapter 9, New Horizons. Lunch with David turned into a weekly ritual. We'd explore different cafes and restaurants, sharing stories about our college experiences, our families, our hobbies. It wasn't a date, but it felt like something more than just old friends catching up. I kept reminding myself it's too soon. I'd only recently ended a tumultuous relationship. But life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. David was gentle, respectful of my boundaries. He never pried too deeply into my past with John, never pushed me for more details than I was comfortable sharing. He made me laugh without conditions, made me feel seen and heard. He had his own scars. A broken engagement 2 years ago, but he seemed to have processed that pain in a healthier way than John ever did. One day, after we finished a meal at a small bistro, David hesitated as we stepped onto the sidewalk. "Rose," he said quietly, "I know you've been through a lot, but I like you. More than just a friend. And I'd like to see where that goes, if you're open to it." My heart thudded. A swirl of emotions coursed through me. Fear, excitement, doubt, hope. "I'm not sure if I'm ready," I admitted, looking down at my shoes. "I'm still healing." "He get that. There's no rush. Just think about it, okay?" I looked up, met his kind eyes, and smiled. "I will." Chapter 10, Confronting the Past. Not long after that conversation, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I answered out of curiosity. A female voice introduced herself as John's sister, Serena. "Rose, I know it's awkward for me to call," she said, her tone nervous. "But John, he's not doing well." I felt my grip tighten on the phone. "What do you mean?" "He's been really down since he moved," Serena explained. "I think he regrets a lot of things. He told me about the condom situation and how he lied. He wanted me to apologize to you for him." I swallowed, emotions clashing inside me. A pang of sympathy, overshadowed by memories of betrayal. "I'm sorry he's struggling, but I can't fix that for him." Serena sighed. "I understand. He's my brother, and I hate seeing him like this." I had to try, you know. I offered her a gentle response. "I appreciate your concern, but I've moved on. He should too. We hung up soon after. The call left me unsettled. Hearing that John regretted everything brought up old feelings. Had I done the right thing? But I knew deep down that I had. Sometimes, no matter how much someone regrets their actions, the damage they've done is irreparable. That night, I took out my journal and wrote about the call. As I poured my thoughts onto the page, I felt clarity settling in. I wished John well, truly, but from a distance. There was no going back. Chapter 11. Embracing the future life has a funny way of moving forward whether we're ready or not. Over the next few weeks, I spent more time with David. We developed a comfortable routine: weekend brunches, evening phone calls, random text messages about silly memes. Slowly, I felt my defenses lowering. I let him into corners of my heart that had been locked away since John's betrayal. One late afternoon, David and I were strolling through a park. The leaves had mostly fallen, leaving bare branches overhead. We found a wooden bench near a pond and sat, watching the ducks paddle in the chilly water. "You know," David said, turning to me, "I'm really glad we reconnected." "Me too," I replied, my voice soft with gratitude. He reached out to take my hand. My heart gave a tiny jolt, but I let him. It felt warm, comforting. We sat there for a while, hand in hand, letting the moment speak for itself. In that silence, I realized something profound. I was no longer haunted by what had happened with John. The memories still hurt, but they didn't control me. I had learned to trust my instincts again, to set boundaries, to value my own well-being. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready for something new. Chapter 20. A letter never sent. Not long afterward, I found myself writing a letter to John. A letter I would never send. "Dear John, I hope you found some peace by now. Your sister said you were struggling, and I'm sorry for that, but I can't be the one to save you. We tried. We gave our relationship 3 years, and maybe we had some good times, but they were overshadowed by betrayal. Maybe the unopened condom was a small thing. Maybe it was big. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is how it made me feel, how it exposed the cracks in our foundation. I used to think I couldn't live without you. Now I see that I can, and I am. I'm not writing this to hurt you. I just want you to know that I hope you heal from whatever caused you to hurt me. I've forgiven you, in my own way. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. It just means I'm letting go of the anger. Take care of yourself, Rose." I folded the letter and placed it in a box with other keepsakes from our time together. Photos, ticket stubs, small gifts. Then I closed the box and pushed it to the back of my closet, a symbol that I had laid our story to rest. Chapter 13. New love, new beginning. Winter arrived quietly. Snow dusted the city streets, and holiday lights decorated every storefront. My tiny apartment felt cozier than ever, filled with soft blankets and the aroma of hot chocolate. David and I had grown closer. We went ice skating together, arms linked as we glided Seine, and occasionally stumbled on the rink. At night, we watched old movies on my couch, laughing over comedic scenes and leaning into each other when the plots turned emotional. On one such night, I found myself resting my head on David's shoulder as the credits rolled. He turned to me, brushed a strand of hair from my face, and hesitated. I could sense what he wanted to say. My heart pounded. Then he whispered, "I think I'm falling in love with you, Rose." I froze for a moment, memories of heartbreak flickering like ghosts in the corners of my mind. But then I remembered all we had shared these past weeks. His kindness, his patience, his unwavering support. Despite the fear, a small, quiet voice inside me said, "You're ready." So I looked into his eyes and replied, "I think I'm falling in love with you too." He kissed me softly, and I felt warmth spread through my entire being. a sense of rightness, of finally finding a place where my heart could rest without fear. Chapter 4 tend to the hard questions, of course. New love doesn't erase old wounds overnight. There were moments when insecurity flared up. If David got a text late at night, I found myself tensing. If I discovered a strange item in his apartment, I'd have a flashback to that unopened condom. But David understood. He reassured me with kindness, never making me feel guilty for my past. One afternoon, I got a call from John's sister again. She told me that John was in therapy, trying to work through his issues. She said he had finally admitted to cheating on me more than once, though he hadn't told me at the time. She also mentioned he was dating someone new, but seemed to be struggling with feelings of guilt. I thanked her for telling me and wished him well. When I hung up, I felt an odd sense of closure. John had moved on, and so had I. That evening, David found me staring out the window of my apartment, lost in thought. When he asked what was on my mind, I told him about the call. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. I turned to him, nodding. "I am. It just feels strange to close such a big chapter of my life." He pulled me into a hug. "You deserve happiness, Rose. Don't let the past keep you from embracing it." I wrapped my arms around him, resting my head against his chest. His heartbeat was steady, comforting. In that moment, I allowed myself to believe that happiness could last. Chapter 15 Learning to believe again. As time went on, my trust in David grew. We confronted disagreements with calm discussions instead of yelling matches. We laughed through minor annoyances, rather than letting them build into fights. It was a stark contrast to the volatility I'd experienced with John. But with happiness came the lurking fear that it might vanish. Some nights, I lay awake, my mind conjuring worst-case scenarios, David hiding secrets, or me failing to keep my insecurities in check. Old nightmares triggered by real past events. In those moments, I practiced the techniques my therapist had taught me: grounding exercises, journaling, and gentle self-talk. I reminded myself that this was a new relationship with a different person and that I had learned from my past. I no longer ignored red flags. I recognized them, and so far there were none. Through the seasons, David and I built a foundation of trust. We took trips together, to the mountains for a weekend of hiking, to a concert in a neighboring city. Each shared experience stitched us closer, weaving a tapestry of memories that didn't come with the baggage of past heartbreak. Chapter 16 Forgiveness and Forward Movement. About a year after I'd left John, I sat in my living room, sipping tea while David read on the couch. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I'd almost forgotten. It was John. "Hey Rose, I know it's been a while. I just wanted to say I'm truly sorry for everything. I'm in a better place now and hope you are too." I stared at the words, a strange mix of emotions bubbling up. Once, such a text would have sent me spiraling. Now I felt calm. I read it again, then typed a short reply. "I'm glad to hear you're doing better. I wish you well." That was it. I set the phone aside. When David asked if everything was all right, I told him the truth. He simply nodded, asked if I felt okay, and when I said yes, we went back to our evening. The sense of closure I felt was profound. John's message was a reminder of how far I'd come. From a terrified, heartbroken woman who questioned her every move to someone who had faced her demons and found love again. Chapter 17 A future unfolding. David and I continued to navigate life's challenges together. We had our share of disagreements, like when I wanted to adopt a cat and he worried about allergies, or when he considered moving to a new apartment. But we faced these issues with openness and compromise. Meanwhile, I pursued my own dreams. I started a blog about healing from toxic relationships, wanting to reach out to others who might be feeling trapped or broken. Writing became a form of empowerment, a way to show myself and others that it's possible to move forward. Through the blog, I connected with people from all over the world who had similar stories. People who had stayed in relationships longer than they should have, people who had found the courage to leave, people who were still in the thick of pain. Their stories resonated with me, reminding me that heartbreak is universal, but so is hope. Chapter 80. Looking back, moving on 2 years later, I found myself sitting in a cafe, much like the one where I'd first hidden from my pain. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and fresh pastries. My laptop was open to the final draft of an e-book I'd written about toxic relationships and self-discovery. I typed the last sentence, saved the file, and leaned back in my seat. A sense of triumph washed over me. I thought about the moment I discovered that unopened condom in John's drawer, and how it had felt like the end of the world. In some ways it was. The end of the world I knew. But it was also the beginning of a journey that led me here. With a final click, I submitted the manuscript to a self-publishing platform. The feeling of releasing my words into the world was both terrifying and exhilarating. I hoped my story would help someone else find their own strength. Chapter 19. The wedding invitation. A month later, a peculiar envelope arrived in the mail. It was from John. Inside, I found a wedding invitation. My heart pounded as I read the details. He was marrying the woman he'd been dating since he moved. The invitation came with a handwritten note. Rose, I know this might seem sudden, but I wanted you to hear it from me. I'm getting married. I'm truly sorry for the ways I hurt you, and I hope you're happy now. I'm not expecting you to come, but I wanted to extend the invitation as a gesture of goodwill. Thank you for everything we shared. John. I stared at the invitation, a swirl of emotions passing through me. Shock, relief, maybe a hint of sadness, but also genuine happiness for him. People can change, I thought. We both had. I showed the invitation to David, who shrugged. Do you want to go? I shook my head. No, that part of my life is over. And it was. But I felt a certain peace in knowing John had found someone else. That perhaps his life was on a positive track. I tucked the invitation into a box with the old keepsakes. Chapter 23. The final dawn. On a crisp spring morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows of my apartment. Now our apartment, because David had moved in with me. The air smelled of vanilla candles and fresh linen. I stretched, feeling content in a way I never had before. I reflected on the journey that brought me here, the heartbreak, the fear, the rediscovery of my own worth. All triggered by a single unopened condom, which had served as the final betrayal in a relationship that was already crumbling. Beside me, David stirred, blinking the sleep from his eyes. He smiled when he saw me awake. Good morning, he whispered, leaning in to kiss my forehead. Morning, I whispered back, my heart warm. I thought of John, wondered where he might be at that exact moment, maybe sharing a similar quiet morning with his new wife. The pang of sadness was gone, replaced by a gentle acceptance. We were simply two people whose paths had crossed and then diverged. I got up, pulled on a robe, and stepped out onto our small balcony. The city stretched before me, alive with possibility. Taking a deep breath, I felt the crisp air fill my lungs. I was no longer haunted by the question of whether I was wrong for leaving him. I knew the answer no. I had done what was necessary to find my peace, my happiness, my sense of self, and for that I would never apologize. Epilogue. Sometimes it takes a painful wake-up call to see the truth about a relationship. For me, that unopened condom was more than just a piece of latex. It was the final crack in a dam already riddled with fractures. Once it burst, there was no going back. In the aftermath, I discovered my own resilience, my capacity to heal and trust again. Heartbreak doesn't have to define us. It can refine us, shaping us into stronger, wiser versions of ourselves. Today, I tell my story not to dwell on betrayal, but to celebrate the freedom that comes after. The freedom to walk away from what doesn't serve us, and the freedom to walk toward a future that does. Above all, I learned that love should never be about endlessly forgiving the unforgivable. Love should be about mutual respect, trust, and a willingness to grow together. If those elements are missing, then walking away isn't just an option. It's the bravest choice you can make for yourself. So, was I wrong for permanently leaving him over an unopened condom? No, it was never just about the condom. It was about a broken trust that could no longer be repaired, about finally choosing me. And in the end, that choice led me to a life far richer, far more genuine than any I had known before.